I mentioned the book of Job, which is a biblical book. How many have read the book of Job? Well, the book of Job is a really interesting book, very, very peculiar book. It's a late book. It's written in the form of Greek dialogue. So it clearly shows Hellenistic influence in the fact that it's written like a Greek dialogue, like a Platonic dialogue or even a play. And so it's not written like earlier books of the Bible. And so and the philosophy it expresses is what we would call cynic, Greek cynic philosophy to some extent. Even a book like Ecclesiastes expresses a kind of cynic philosophy. All is vanity, vanity, vanity. One generation passes away and a new generation cometh, but the earth abideth forever, and nothing really amounts to anything. They don't really have a doctrine at that point, and it's probably around the 5th century BC, of resurrection of the dead. Because if they had that doctrine that was seriously being used or considered, they would have an answer for all these things, you see. That everything isn't vanity. If you're good in this world, you'll be resurrected in the next, and so therefore everything was going to pay off for you. So those books show a point in the development of Hebrew culture, Jewish religious Hebrew culture, which this doctrine has not yet come into active play. Maybe some people had it, but most people didn't. That would be around the 5th century BC, so those books are probably around the 4th, 3rd, 5th, 3rd century BC having been written. And Job is among them. Job is asking the question, why do the good men suffer? Why do the righteous suffer? Why do little children suffer? Now, the wise guy later on who's got all the answers to say, oh, well, they suffer in this world, so they'll have a better life in the next. But Job doesn't have that answer. He doesn't have the answer. For those who read Job, that answer is not given. He tries to give an answer, but the answer isn't clear. He's wrestling with the problem of unjustified suffering of the righteous, and he doesn't really have an answer for it. But for our purposes, the interesting part of that book, again, the book I think shows it to be around 5th or 4th century BC. The interesting part of that book, I see people think all these things are from God or the Word of God, as I was saying in my Old Testament class the other night. I mean, this is a useful, cohesive doctrine to bring about communal solidarity and so on. But anyone who studies documents sooner or later finds out there's human activity involved in the document, and whether God had anything to do with it or inspired it is your own personal evaluation. But you can study a document and see pretty much from the time and place in which it came. And we normally think God as being an eternal being of some kind, so one doesn't usually think of him as developing in time and place. But anyway, take the book of Job is peculiar in that, did you notice, those of you who read it, does not take place in Palestine or Israel at all. It's not in Palestine and Israel. It's in what we would call the diaspora, or the spreading out away from Palestine and Israel. Where does it take place? It actually takes place in northern Arabia. All the place names are northern Arabian place names that actually still exist to this very day. One of them is Taima. It's an oasis in northern Arabia. Job travels to the oasis of Taima. It's a northern Arabian Jewish book, which shows the Jewish presence in northern Arabia in the 5th century BC. So the Jewish presence goes back quite a ways in Arabia. Not that one wants to make a Zionist claim to Arabia particularly, but I'm trying to say that the Jewish presence is way back there. And Job is a good book to illustrate that, because all the place names in Job are Northern Arabian place names. So whether Job is real or not, the writer knows Northern Arabia and knows the place names in Northern Arabia, and that would be the 5th or 4th or 3rd century BC. So I think that is pretty interesting. Getting back to the Arabs, I was saying to you that once you got in the Quran the idea that the Arab peoples are descendants of Abraham through his older son Ishmael, the daughter of the Egyptian bondservant Hagar, the son of the Egyptian bondservant Hagar, as opposed to the normative wife. Who was the normative wife? Sarah, according to the biblical presentation. And who was the child of Sarah? Isaac. Now the Bible, Hebrew, Jewish, Christian, focuses on preferred lines. It's not just. I mean, no one's trying to say these are just books. These are books of their time, and they do show the outlook of their period. I mean, in your family, let's face it, your family is interested in its line. It's not interested in your cousin's line. Your cousin's family can be interested in their line, but your family, you want to know who your dad was, or your grandfather was, or your great-grandfather was. That's just normal human nature. It's not being mean or anything like that. And so the Jews out of that get a chosen people idea coming down that their line is a preferred line because God put his blessing and choice on them, and so on and so forth. Today, if you were a Jewish background, you could say, yeah, Jews are preferred line, chosen for suffering, nothing else. It's always dangerous to set yourself out there as a chosen line, because then people are surely going to make you suffer. The same as Joseph did with his brothers. You know, Joseph went around, acting like he was King Tut, and his brothers paid him back in kind. So it doesn't often pay to be the preferred or even the apple of your parents' eye, because someone else might take offense and get you anyway because of that. In any event, you have to understand, whether you're a Muslim, Christian, Jew, or Buddhist, or some other, I know that Muslims prefer not to acknowledge these things. First of all, they don't know them, because, as I said, they only go far back as Muhammad. And their information comes through the presentation of Muhammad, which, as we've said several times now, is a miraculous presentation in their eyes, presented to him through angelic auspices, particularly the angel Gabriel I mentioned last time. So they feel, whether they're told to feel this or just a human being feels, oh, I don't have to do anything more than that. I got it all from the miraculous book here. But having said that, if you're a fair-minded person, and I'm talking about whatever your religion is, you look at it, you realize that that material is based on the genealogies in the Old Testament. That material has come down through the genealogies in the Old Testament. And like it or not, and it's not to say one is superior or inferior, the genealogies in the Old Testament are much more fleshed out than that. Like anybody, Muhammad as a human being, or the angel dictating to him, is only interested in Muhammad's particular line coming from those genealogies. He's not interested in the totality of the genealogies. But the totality is not to be found in the Quran. The totality, as far as what we can know about what was presented, good or bad, it may not be accurate even in the Old Testament. No one is saying the Old Testament is accurate necessarily. It's the folk memory of a people, which can be accurate, can be inaccurate, fleshes out the entire genealogies of these groups. Now, for the Old Testament and for the Quran and for Christianity, Abraham is the important person. Now, like it or not, everyone is going around claiming descent from Abraham. And the question is, of course, did Abraham really exist? How do we know he existed? Where did Muhammad, where did the angel, whoever told Muhammad these things, the angel or some people, whatever, get the idea that Abraham was the important person? Well, obviously the book that tells that Abraham is the important person is the Hebrew Bible. That's where, because it's the Jews'